evening. Welcome to episode 72. Tonight, we're going to talk about my greatest regret. Now, for anyone who's been following me or knows me, I think it's pretty obvious what that answer is. And perhaps you share this regret as well. It is the regret of not just buying and holding Bitcoin in the past 10 years of talking to people about it. Now, it's done me well, and sold I've sold it for a car, or I've sold it for to start a business, and that's my biggest regret. And really, I think all Bitcoiners go through this regret, and regret is a great teacher. It really, especially in the case of like sound money, in the case of um, solid currency like Bitcoin. I shouldn't say currency, but an asset for now. I don't think it's a currency yet. And what it is the propensity to save. It really teaches you about your time preference and regret teaches you about yourself. You learn from your mistakes and failures, right? And when you come around a second time and you're looking at things differently, that's when you get orange pilled. Like, you try Bitcoin out, you kind of like it, you see it as a stock, and then you try some other stuff, hoping for some better returns, and then you eventually, and we've talked about the phases before, but then you transition to like a commodity investor, and then you start really, it's when you start thinking about it as a store of value, like not just thinking about it, but actually realizing and understanding it as a store of value, that's when you are truly orange pilled. And it's about like, that's when you're embracing the Bitcoin culture. You're getting into the Bitcoin time preference, where you prefer to save and buy Bitcoin instead of spending it now on things that you might want. And the Bitcoin standard, and you're working towards the Bitcoin standard of living. Now, there's a big component that I think is missing or not complete or fully built out yet in that process. And it would have, I don't know if it would have made my life easier and would have actually helped me keep Bitcoin over these years or not. I think that's actually a culture thing, and it can't really be, even with the best tools. Like, if you're not bought into the culture and the time preference and the standard of living, I think you're just gonna find a way to lose your Bitcoin anyway. But for those who are actually seeing it as a store of value, and for myself actually trying to accumulate this time, having taken the orange pill, the tool missing is the ability to draw against and borrow or leverage your Bitcoin for the purchases to adjust to your time preference. Meaning, like, things come up, you save for a while, and you want to, like, you do want to spend, or even, like, invest in a business that they're not many, but there are some businesses that do make stronger returns than Bitcoin. And I think especially now, if you project Bitcoin out 10 years, and you expect like a $1 million Bitcoin in 10 years time, you're basically projecting a 25% annual compound average growth rate. And if you operate your own business, your own cash flowing business, you can actually make a higher return than that. Whether it's leveraged or not, depending on the type of business, people do make up to 60% annual returns. Car dealerships, well run, for example, will do that. And so you have this like opportunity cost, and the maxis will just say nothing is worth it. Just keep holding your Bitcoin. And for those not necessarily believing that, it's a real opportunity cost. You could make more money now to buy more Bitcoin and build wealth and save faster. And this reminds me of, well, all the tariff stuff and the stocks moving up and down. You may or may not be familiar with a margin account. Basically, or like a home equity line of credit. When we're talking about store of value, we're talking about assets that we as a society perceive to be going up in value, and then we basically borrow against them because it's basically a cheaper cost, a cheaper way to get capital and a cheaper way to access capital, so you don't have to sell this asset that will go up in value or expect it to go up in value over time. And if you have needs, like if, for example, when the stocks just dipped over the weekend, well, over last week until the tariffs news changed again, um, if you had to sell for any reason, or you like, long term, all stocks go up over the past years and they will continue to do so. Like everything is temporary. They're volatile, but long term, they are just going to keep accruing value, especially in a fiat world. Um, but you have some expense or you need to sell and you sold, you would have been caught in a really bad moment. And in order to avoid that, basically, you want to open the options available to you are like a margin account. Same thing with like a home. If you have equity in a home, you can also get a line of credit against your home. And usually these are actually for pretty long periods of time. And, they have their nuances, but bringing this back to Bitcoin, this does not exist on a longer term period yet for Bitcoin. And at similar prices, really, that's the key. It does not exist at enough capital concentration to match the prices of to match the cost of capital against homes or stocks. And there's another aspect to this, which is actually taxes. The tax, and this is that, and okay, so you're a trader, you got in, out, whatever. Move on to the bigger picture, and for people who have the privilege to think about the bigger picture, wealthier people use this technique all the time. It's called buy, borrow, die. They'll buy stocks, they'll buy homes, they'll build equity into it, they'll borrow against it, because that's the last, final, and biggest advantage of borrowing against your assets. It's the ability to defer. It's the ability to defer all the taxes and truly bank yourself on your own assets. All the funds and charities. In fact, I spoke to someone at BitBlock Boom. He mentioned that there's a way where if you own a company, you can set up your own Roth IRA and put your Bitcoin in there so that you can you can set it up to defer taxes and a tax-free savings account for retirement and all that stuff. More and more people, I think, will need to get educated about this, and I kind of want to build some tooling that will support that, some tooling that will help. I've been thinking of like something like a DCA score, which is a dollar cost average score for Bitcoin, that kind of gives you a score for how regular you are in purchasing Bitcoin. And then have like a lending calculator that compares rates across multiple offerings, and then also just really start offering our own thing for like, hey, you could buy a laptop, right? You want to buy you need to run some AI stuff. You want to get on the cutting edge. You want the best laptop. It's $5,000, $6,000. You don't need to sell your Bitcoin. You can just stake your Bitcoin, put that up as collateral, and borrow for your MacBook. There is a question of like, oh, what about the value of the MacBook? How do we get the MacBook back if you default on your loan and things like that? There are things yet to be considered. And really, if you put up your Bitcoin as collateral and you run away with the MacBook, I don't really care. We would just take the Bitcoin. I want to continue exploring this, and I will be sharing more tomorrow. Thank you.